All right, time to get down to the next Mr. GLOAT podcast of the UFC 4 Revenge of the Warriors, live in Tulsa, Oklahoma, December 16th, 1994. And I swear to gosh, I have some hair in my mouth for some reason. I don't know why I got that there. But anyway, guys, enough talking. We have a sold-out crowd. Well, not sold out, to be honest, even though the commentators would later tell us that sooner enough, but I won't get into that. With 5,857 people in attendance watching the historical UFC 4. This is the 30th anniversary of this event taking place 30 years ago. It's a 120,000 pay-per-view buy. And my, oh my, I do not know why I just ate today, but that doesn't matter, guys. Here's the story, guys. The story goes is that this is now the fourth UFC event in the last 13 months. And there's a lot of changes. And I hate to talk about it because I hated it. And even a decade ago when I last saw this show, I can understand why I didn't stick around to watch UFC 5 or any of the other shows. Well, I did saw UFC 5 as well a long time, but I never saw UFC 6 or any of the other old shows like 10 years ago because there were so many changes and I did not like it. And the first thing I didn't like about this is that we start out with a cold opening of that awesome theme. Well, I wouldn't say theme, but other than that awesome static electricity, they give us the warning, viewer discretion is advised thing, and then, we still get that thing again. And before you know it, we get a little bit of classical music. And I'm like, what the heck is going on here? Why are we listening to classical music? Because if you guys haven't seen the first three shows, the first two intros were that awesome guitar beats that started out strong. The third one looked like a rendition of an AC/DC cover thing. Like they were doing that awesome na 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 na. And now they're guys, keep this in mind. The show opens up with the Semaphore Entertainment Group, and then it gives us the presence, and then it just why? Like, what? That's how we're opening up the show with a classical what? I hate it. And then we have a new commentator I haven't heard of telling us that this is the largest statue in Tulsa, Oklahoma, or in the world is what he said. Called the, he called it the, what did he call it again? He called it the golden driller that stands 76 feet tall and weighs 43,000 pounds. I don't get it. It's so dumb. He even said it's hard to knock down, which is our theme tonight. But sure, yeah, I didn't like it. So yeah, guys, the reason I didn't like to watch any more of the old UFC shows after UFC 4 is that we have a new play-by-play announcer, Bruce Beck, and color commentator Jeff Blatnick, which are the first time that they were paired together in a viewer show as the regular commentary team for UFC broadcasts up until including UFC 15. But they were still joined by regular commentator Jim Brown, the Hall of Famer of NFL, and they still have Rich Goins as the announcer. So, yeah. So we have Bruce Beck opening up the show. And surprisingly, he gives us information. We have Jim Brown on live with us. We are live in the pavilion, the Expo Square Pavilion, as said before. It's not a sold-out pack. And they tell us who will remain standing and who will be champion. Revenge of the Warriors. And Bruce Beck is giving us this awesome stuff. Highly skilled fighters of jiu-jitsu, this or that, battle for $64,000 and a right to say they are the ultimate fighting champion. And let us warn from the start, there's no exhibition. This is a brutal combat. He let us know that. And of course, he brings in Jim Brown, telling him that he's the first one to work the first three shows. But he's not the only one being there. And I will say, though, I love Jim Brown. I like Jim Brown. It's great. Because I love that Jim Brown pointed out the word revenge is actually a major factor, saying that in the last show of UFC 3 where Gracie did not continue in the semifinal, so he's out to take revenge from the Gracie family because after all his father, he never lost a fight. Now, on the other hand, Joe Sando, which is another guy that I haven't heard of, is a guy that was represented in chemo, and he lost a very close fight to Hoyce, which is weird because this guy never fought Gracie. But I later came to realize, guys, in UFC 3, I later looked back the information, and this is what Jim Brown said, but I didn't understand what he meant by that until I later realized, oh, wait a minute, I think he's talking about Kimo Leopoldo. Because Kimo Leopoldo was a friend of Joe Son, and they were both together at the time when Joe Son and Kimo were in their early mid-20s at the time when they were training to fight Royce Gracie in UFC 3, and Kimo lost, but he did injure Royce Gracie at the time, which meant they somehow did stop him from winning the tournament. So now Joe Son wants to come out and take over for Kimo to let him fight in the event. And guys, there's a lot of horrible information I do not want to talk about Joe Son, and God almighty, it's bad. And then, after all the talk, Bruce Beck tells us that we have a couple alternate bouts that just took place at the time. And by the way, he even talks about another member of the 1984 Olympic gold medalist in Greco-Roman wrestling in the super heavyweight division, which I later realized was Jeff Blatnick. Until I later realized, I was surprised because I didn't know Jeff Blatnick was an Olympic 100 kilogram gold medalist. And sadly, he passed away in 2012 at 55. Well, rest in peace. Rest in peace. Dang. Oh, and by the way, guys, I forgot to mention, guys, remember Tylee Tui that lost his first professional fight and his only fight in MMA? He just passed away a month after our boxer One Glove fighter, you know, the guy that took on Royce Gracie in UFC 1 with his one boxing glove. I did a memory of him on another podcast. Well, Tylee Tui passed away a month later after he was gone. Yeah, I forgot what his name is. His name was Art Jimerson. Yeah. Well, when Art Jimerson passed away in May the 8th this year, Tylee Tui would pass away a month and a half later on June the 20th this year. Jesus. So technically, Ken Shamrock, Royce Gracie, Gerard Gorget, and Zane Frazier are the only 4 guys in the tournament in UFC 1 are still alive today. Trent Jenkins and Jason DeLucia, 2 guys that were in an alternate bout that same year, are still alive, but they were never involved in anything. But yeah, so rest in peace to Tylee Tui, great guy. And also Jim Brown, ladies and gentlemen, he passed away last year ago, a year and a half, in May the 18th at the age of 87, 2023. Dang, there's a lot of legend people that started in UFC 1 are passing away quickly this year. That's... Ugh. But anyway, guys, like I said before, we do have alternate bout where we have, 3 alternate bouts. So as said before, they did say that these things were taking place on pay-per-view broadcast, as well as a fight, as I think one person in the comments said that Jason Farron versus Guy Mesger, which Mesger defeated Jason at 213 in TKO corner stoppage, that fight took place after the last fight in the semifinals and before the finals, just to give 2 of the guys that won in the semifinals would catch their breath to see if they're medically prepared, and then they'll go to the finals. I don't know if that's true. I couldn't find footage, but yeah, let me know in the comments if that's true or not. But the other 2 fights, which I couldn't find footage of the Guy Mesger fight, and I couldn't find footage of one of the alternate bouts that was involved in the tournament, but there is one, but they would show us footage of it later in the episode, but there is one I did found. So here's the thing about the alternate bout. So the 3 alternate fights, one of them isn't much. It's just a worked fight. I don't care. But they actually have rules for 2 alternate bouts that would take place, where we have Joe Charles, Kevin Rozier, and Eldo Diaz and Marcus Bossett two of those guys would have two alternate fights. And if they win, they actually stay in the corner for passing. So technically they only win their first fight in alternate bouts to make it past the quarterfinals, just to get them prepared up. Because if any fighters that made it to the quarterfinals and won, but if they were forced to withdraw due to injury, the two fighters that won in the alternate bout would take over for the guy that got injured that was advanced to the semifinals and would take over. That will come into play later, guys, but I just didn't like that rule because what are the odds of any of the fighters in the alternate bout that are injured might not even fight? I just didn't like that rule. I just didn't like that rule. And surprisingly, they did tell us about this, and they would also show us the brackets today. The only brackets we have here are an 8-man tournament where we have Ron Van Cleef versus Royce Gracie in the first fight. Hey, first fight for Gracie. That's pretty rare. Joe Son versus Keith Hackney. Keith has coming back, and Joe Son is taking over for his friend Kimo Leopoldo. Melton Bowen, nothing much but a boxer I haven't heard of, taking on defending champion Steve Jenham. Let's see if he can defend it. And Anthony Macias, a kickboxing fighter, or I wouldn't say kickboxing, but Muay Thai fighter, versus Daniel Severn. Yes, Dan Severn. Dan the Beast Severn was never a name at the time. Dan the Beast Severn would never become his nickname until a year later. So in UFC 4, which is his debut in this tournament, he goes by the name of Daniel Severn, but later when he was announcing what his name is, he would actually say, "Hi, I'm Dan Severn." So, but yeah, they would also show us doctors in the area. They would show us the only referee, Big John McCarthy, being there. He'll be the only fighter stepping into place as we speak. And then, but by the way, before they showed us that, let's not get carried away. Before they show us the alternate bout and the bracket for the tournament bracket, they would show us, like I said, Jeff Blackney. Jeff Blatnick. Man, it's so hard to tell these new commentators. So he gets introduced outside the octagon, saying it's a 750 square area, measured 52 feet across. And he emphasizes that this is not a ring. This is not a ring. He's emphasizing this to us. It's not a ring. It's a fighting surface which is surrounded by 5-foot-tall chain-link fences, which is heavily reinforced. It's heavily padded to protect the fighters. Even the gates of the combatants come in has had a bolt action lock, so it cannot be opened. Yeah, if you don't think it cannot be open, go back to UFC 3 and you'll say how many times it's been opened during a fight. Yeah, remember Emmanuel Yarbrough slamming Keith Hackney into the wall of the cage in the open? Yeah, that might be the first and only time that's ever happened before, but it's not the last time a cage door has ever opened, because remember, Ken Shamrock won in the semifinals against a fighter that was replaced, and, they got involved breaking the cage door open, but surprisingly, no one exited. So, yeah, we had two weird incidences that year, but I'm trying to find footage if there's any other UFC incident where a cage door or a wall got broken open during a fight. Let me know, because there's only two incidences that have happened right now, and they both happened in UFC 3. So, yeah, Jeff tells us this or that. At this time, the mat where these people are on are a thin pad. It's a tight canvas. No one can run, but there's no way that you can hide. So, yes, guys. Let's get to the alternate bout, ladies and gentlemen, because I don't have much information about anything about the bouts. But there's only one fight I will review, and that fight is Joe Charles versus the one and only Kevin Rozier. And oh boy, guys. So guys, Kevin Rozier is finally back after 1 year. He's finally recovering. But before the fight starts, guys. So guys, I love that they bring back the narrator narrating each fighter and people coming into the ring. He narrates Joe Charles, the judo fighter, as a guy that's involved with crazy stuff, which is crazy. I'm surprised. Joe Charles looks like this dangerous man. I don't know what to say about him, but he looks like a really dangerous person. And he's coming out with this awesome uniform. I really love the uniform Joe Charles came out with. But the real story is Kevin Rozier. So the narrator points out that the kickboxer Kevin Rozier came out of retirement to fight in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. 1 year later, he's back in the octagon again, looking meaner and meaner than ever. And then Kevin Rozier says, this is what he says after he stops smashing the camera. Like, I love when the narrator stops talking. They show us a few more seconds of Kevin still pounding on the camera. That's the camera is looking up, and he's like at his face, like where I'm pointing, he's just smashing the camera. It was so friggin' hilarious. And then it cuts to him just saying, "Hi, I'm Kevin Rozier, and I enter in UFC 4, and I'm gonna do my best." Because the one from last year, I weighed a lot of weight, but now I'm completely different. And that's what Kevin Rozier pointed out, because in the first UFC, he was out of shape. But now he's in more shape. But yet again, losing that amount of weight for 1 year to come back is crazy. By the way, around last January, months after that show, he took on a guy that went by the name of a guy named Houston Door, and he went 2 rounds with him to become the WKKC World Super Heavyweight Champion. So good job for Rozier for recovering. Yeah, it just seemed like he was a 3-time WKA kickbox champion, ISKA International Karate Champion, World Karate in 1990. He was winning champions in the mid and late 90s and such. Jesus. And then he comes back after his false errors in UFC 1 and he wins, and now he's at it. I'm surprised. He's that damn good. I don't know what to say. But guess what? That's not going to be the last time we're going to hear about Houston Door. So Kevin Rozier comes out, and the commentators pointed out that he's 66-6. So this was his last win when he defeated Kevin Door. Someone said that his last win was against Kevin Door months ago, but no one could show the record. But the commentators do say he's 66-6, and rumors did say that he did lost a fight a year or so around the time, and then his last kickboxing fight took place in 1999 May for the IFK champion when he lost against Mike Labrie by TKO to a left hook. But surprisingly, the fight was tough because the fight went 10 rounds and ended in 26 seconds. So Rozier lost, but hey, he stood up for 10 rounds. Gotta respect that. So, yeah, I didn't like this fight. It was so bad. And it's even crazy when Rozier comes out, bald hair, and by the way, guys, I kind of find it interesting because every fighter enters the ring. One fighter is entering with that crazy guitar slashing AC/DC thunderstruck sound, and then there's one song with that, and then they show us that song that I thought was like U2, Where the Streets Have No Name, with that like UFC only had 2 theme songs at the time, and they're still playing it even after UFC 1. Do they have any other theme songs other than those 2? I don't know why they keep playing those. I don't understand. It's crazy. By the way, it's kind of crazy because with Rozier being 242 pounds at the time and Joe 260, looking at the weight difference is very crazy. I don't know what to say about that. But anyway, they call out Rich Goins, and then, of course, we have ring card girls just holding on to the names of what they are, judo, kickboxing. And then they show Rich Goins announcing the fighters with his ugly mustache and his red bow tie, and he looked like he came out of a porn star movie. I don't know what Rich Goins was thinking of with that mustache he was wearing and the red bow tie. He just looked... I just didn't like what Rich Goins was wearing. I hate it. So he announces both fighters. He announces both fighters, and then after they don't walk to the middle of the ring and tell them, okay, boys, this is what you do. No, what they do, he announces the names. He walks out. The referee tells them, are you ready? Are you ready? Let's go. Get it on and ring the bell. And that's how the fight starts. And the fight starts out pretty interesting where Rozier looked like he was going to throw a left punch. And then we have punch upstairs by Joe. And then out of nowhere, they're both stunning each other. And then Kevin throws a right kick to the groin. And then they're having multiple punches. But then a left punch by Charles upstairs knocks out Kevin. Down goes Rozier. Then he goes for an upside down flip on the canvas. Kevin does, only for Joe to grab his right arm, puts in the submission armbar. 14 seconds of the fight. He taps out. I just felt... It was a crazy counter move. They tell us the replay about the punch and knockout. I don't know, guys. By the way, guys, I couldn't find footage of the interview, but it's surprised that they would show us an interview by Joe Charles winning the fight. But when I found the full event of UFC 4 without the alternate bouts, I couldn't find interviews. So I just don't know. It really confused me. So, yeah. So, yeah, guys, all I could say, guys, I just don't know about any of this. But at the end of the day, guys, I just want to ignore that fight. As for the Marcus Bossett and Eldo D. Xavier, well, I don't have footage for that, but we will get to that moment sooner or later. As for Kevin Rozier's career in UFC, he would come back in August 1996 in IFC 2 Mayhem in Mississippi against Houston Dar. And surprisingly, Houston got his revenge and won by a guillotine choke submission at 11 minutes and 10 seconds. And then Kevin took a couple years off again. By February to December 1998, he had 2 fights, Extreme Challenge 15 in February, and then December 8th, Cage Combat 1, which were the events, and both of those fights were Dan Severn. Dan won the first fight by TKO to the knees at 53 seconds, and then the rematch was at 1 minute flat by submission. Don't know what submission was. April the 2nd, Kevin goes back to IFC Fighters Revenge and defeats Joe Bramante by rear naked choke at 101. And then at 1 minute 12 seconds in January 22nd, 2000, he takes on Brad Gabriel and Brad defeats Kevin by TKO punches. Yeah, record 2 wins and 6 losses. Yeah, and as for Kevin's boxing career, he started in the late 90s. He was already losing fights and taking on nobody fights. His 8th professional fight was against Nikolai Valuev in 1997. Got him in first round. Joe Messi fought him in July. A year later in 98, second round TKO loss. And then months later, he was taking on some fighters that used to be contenders like Derek Brown, Shannon Miller, lower type fighters, but still better than him. Ramon Buaj, a Polish fighter, which was somewhat of a European title winner in 2000. And, well, he defeated Kevin. Vinny Matalone, another good contender I enjoyed. Ty Fields, the hype job guy that was a waste, defeated Kevin in 2000. And then he lost against a Frenchman months later in September. And then in January, and then in December is what I meant to say. And then 12 months later in December, he takes on one more other fighter, and Kevin retires with that loss with 7 wins and 17 losses. It just goes to show you that he was a good kickboxer and a little bit of a karate fighter. But when it came to MMA and boxing, professional boxing, he just never had it. We have special abilities, but we're not going to be good in every single show or every single. It is what it is, but yeah, Kevin Rozier had nothing with us. So now we come out to the competition, ladies and gentlemen. The first fight, Ron Queef versus Royce Gracie. Oh my gosh, I'm going to hate this one. So this guy is a living legend with a bunch of records in his win. And Ron Van Queef comes out saying that he's a black dragon. He's 51 years old in New York City, and he's been practicing martial arts for 4 years. And none of these participants have ever been alive. So he's going to test himself and do his very best of UFC. And then he comes out with a 10th degree black belt. Ron's not bad. Guys, this fight, I didn't like it. Royce Gracie comes out, and Ron Van Queef comes out with boxers that are American boxers. Royce Gracie comes out pointing out that he's trying to prove himself. He even tells himself that he's Gracie. And then he tells us that he was here in the first, second, and third tournament, and he's back to prove that his family style is the best. At the end of the day, it is what it is, guys. But, guys, I didn't like this. Guys, this is 1994, December. This is guys, as I'm recording this is 1 month after Mike Tyson and Jake Paul. Jake Paul was already 27 years old, and Mike Tyson was 58 years old when they fought. Royce Gracie's in his mid-20s, and this Ron guy is 51 years old. And I'm like, even a long time ago, I did not like this fight for an old guy taking on Gracie. And even though Ron wanted Gracie, it was not good. So the both fighters announce each other. They announce the fight, this or that. This is like watching Jake Paul and Mike Tyson in 1994. I just didn't enjoy this fight. By the way, what's even crazy is that said that Gracie was 27 years old, but keep this in mind, guys, he was born on December the 12th. 4 days before this event started on December the 16th, he just turned 28 years old before this event. But someone did say that he was 28 years old, so someone made a botched error. It won't be the last time that we're going to have another botched error of someone's age difference, but hey, it is what it is. Both of them are under 200 pounds, and that's all that matters. The fight starts with both guys. They throw kicks, but Gracie takes him down early in the fight with a double leg. He's taking him down to the canvas quickly. And at this moment, he's trying to force his opponent to submit. He's on top of him. He wants to see if Ron is going to make a mistake and go on his stomach, and then he might go for a rear naked choke or even anything. And I think I'm expecting a rear naked choke in this fight, but maybe a triangle choke. And at this moment, we're 40 seconds in the fight, and Ron is trying to get back up, push his legs. And at 1 minute, he's just on top of him for the rest of the fight. And it was just so bad. At this moment, Gracie isn't throwing any punches or anything else until we get to the 2-minute mark. Because at this moment, when we get to the 2-minute mark, at this moment, this is what happens. Ron is getting laid on with Gracie on top of him. He has his arms wrapped around him. He's grabbing onto Gracie's uniform. And at the 2-minute mark, this is when Gracie finally gets back up, and he picks up his right elbow and just pounds this 51-year-old man in the head for only a few times. It was just, oh boy, I just wanted this fight to end. It was so bad. And then at 2 minutes, at this moment, at 2 minutes and 30 seconds of the fight, Gracie would take a couple extra shots with him. Even though he is holding him, he's grabbing, grabbing, hair pulls. And then we finally get to the 3-minute and 20-second mark is when Ron decides to go around his stomach. Gracie finds it, puts the rear naked choke, and at 3:49, and surprisingly, the referee actually doesn't hesitate to stop the fight. Because as he finally throws the first tap, because it's crazy, because the fight ends where Ron, when he puts his hand down on the ground once, because Ron picks up his hand and taps once, and Big John just stops it before he taps again. It's kind of crazy because other fighters later in the fight that would submit, Big John would hesitate to stop the fight. Yeah, I don't get it. So the fight's over. They both get up, and Ron walks up to Gracie. Gracie's celebrating with his family. He turns around. They both hug each other with respect. And then they show us replay with the elbows and such. It was bad. It was bad. I hated it. I just don't want to talk about this fight anymore. And Jim does tell us when you get to that position, it's very difficult with that move he did. And like I said, Bruce did say that Van Cleef wanted Gracie. He wanted him right away. Even after the press conference, he told them that there's a God. And in a way, a 50-year-old man or a 51-year-old man, like he said, Gracie might be the safest pick because a boxer might devastate him with punches to the head. Right. And by the way, Jim Brown even points this out. Jim also points out that Royce would have actually punched him in the face if he wanted to and did not do it. And because he even pointed out that maybe his father told him to not, because his father told him not to hurt anyone unnecessarily, which is part of the family tradition. Which is, yeah, it's crazy. And by the way, it's even crazy that they even realized that Helio Gracie even learned his jiu-jitsu from a Japanese master, which they also pointed that out for 7 decades. Jesus, how was I supposed to know that? I did not know that. It's crazy. So, yeah, guys, Ron Van Cleef would never fight again, and surprisingly, he's still alive to this day. Dang. So, yeah, I don't know what to say. So, Keith Hackney versus Joe San. Joe San doing Taekwondo, but they would later say he's doing Joe Sando. Kempo, Keith Hackney. Keep this in mind, guys. Joe Sando was born in November 22nd, 1970, so he's 24 years old, but on the tail of the tape would say that he's 23 years old, but the commentators would say that he's 24 years old, so someone was right, but the tail of the tape was wrong, question mark. I don't know. Keith Hackney, accurate. But yeah, guys, before we talk about Joe San, let's just talk about this fight and everything else. So they give us a package, a promo package of Joe San having a cross on his back, which is, oh God, not again. Joe San, known to some of Chemo's manager, returns to the octagon tonight as a fighter. And at 23 years of age, which is what the narrator said, but he's 24 years old about a month ago before this fight. He is a student of Taekwondo and Judo and a founder of his own system of martial arts, Joe Sando. And then he tells, guys, I'm out of it, guys. I just don't want to talk about this. Yeah, so like I said, Joe Sando was a trainer in the third fight, but now he's a fighter. What the heck? And Joe points out his name. So Joe says, and I quote, "Hi, my name is Joe Sando. Joe San. I'm from Huntington Beach, California, which is a pretty awesome place. I actually like it." And then he says, "The Lord said, not by my might, but my strength, but with my spirit, said the Lord. You guys will see the spirit of the Lord of Jesus Christ tonight." Oh yeah, we're gonna see it, all right. And there's a lot of information that you viewers are gonna hear from me after this is over. And then the camera cuts to hell and destruction are never full, so the eyes of a man are never satisfied. Proverbs 27:20, the Holy Bible. And as that person passes by, commentator points out, well, he's definitely an unknown. Sure, why not? And then another guy with a board shows another word, another sign said, For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. Guys, I don't know what to say, guys. I don't know what to say about this. It's so bad. So anyway, he found his own style, commentator said, and then as there's barely just a few people barely walking out of the ring, the two people with the signs walk out of the ring, and just a few people are entering the ring, but then when they finally get a group of people, we have Joe San, oh my gosh, carrying a friggin' cross on his back like Kimo Leopardo. God almighty. So here's the story, guys. If Keith Hackney wins, he's finally going to get a match with the defending two-time champion, Royce Gracie. If Joe Sando wins this fight, he's going to get his revenge on Gracie defeating his fighter, Kimo Leopardo. So we have two fighters that want to take on Gracie in the semifinals. Well, it is interesting. By the way, Jim Brown even points out with a master who's caught doing the same thing, you know, with the cross and the strange stuff of religion and fighting. And he points out he doesn't understand. And then for some hilarious reason, like Bruce Beck echoes that statement he said, saying, frankly, Jim, neither do I. And neither do you, Jim said. Like, for me, I'm just really surprised. And you're seeing, like, Joe's back is bending in an L shape. He could barely carry the friggin' cross. My golly. So as he finally enters a ring, which, thank gosh, I don't know what to say about this. So he finally walks into the ring with these ugly red underwear trunks. It's so weird. And by the way, he's 5'4" tall. He's taking on 5'11.5" guy, Keith Hackney, that's 36 years old, a decade older than this 5'4" guy. It's crazy. So they bring out Keith Hackney, where he returns tonight representing a white tiger Kempo. He points out where he is. He's a Saviano's white tiger Kempo karate, and he's back at the UFC to test his skills. And surprisingly, the commentators even point out Keith Hackney, where he fought a 600 guy named Emmanuel Yarbrough in UFC 3, won the first round, but he broke his hand and couldn't continue. But he did say that the hand is okay until he delivered 36 unanswered blows to a 600-pound person's head, but did hurt himself in winning that bout. But he did say the hand is ready until the commentator pointed out, well, he asked him this question, whether one can heal that quickly, but I'm sure he learned not to keep punching in the head. And then Jim points out, well, actually, Jeff, this is what Jeff Blacknick said. He said that. So Jim told Jeff, well, actually, Jeff, it wasn't really broken. There was something wrong with the soft tissue, and I don't think it was actually a brain. For a brain? What? Like, I try to understand what he said. It was a brain, but when I actually later looked at it, because I tried to look back at the footage, but yeah, again, the quality wasn't that, the volume and the sound was hard to listen to, so I had to put my headphones on. And when he said the tissue, I don't think it was actually a sprain, is what I thought. I thought he said it was a brain, but I later realized that Jeff or Bruce echoed back, cut Jim Brown from talking, saying is sprain. So I thought they said brain, but it was sprain. They didn't think that his hand was sprained. It was just a soft tissue, but yeah. But yeah, they did point out Yarbrough, that was an opposing figure, 600 pounds, and Hackney was not intimidated. So yeah, they just kept talking about that while he's entering the ring. Like I said before, the tail of the tape actually said that he was actually 24 years old. So the tail of the tape, I actually did this completely opposite. What I meant to say is, I didn't meant to say that the tail of the tape was wrong, but the commentators were wrong. That's what I meant to say. The commentator said that he was 23 years old, but the tail of the tape said he was 24 years old. So ignore that part I said before where I said the tail of the tape was wrong. I was wrong, and the tail of the tape was right. But they were wrong that Royce Gracie was actually, his age was wrong. He was actually born 4 years ago. 4 days ago before this show. I mean, you get what I mean. Like, yeah, I'm not going to get to that. Anyway, commentators, announcers, this or that. At this moment, guys, we have Joe Sando style, girls holding up the card. There's a woman with a Hooters on, and then we have Joe San talking to the camera, to the audience, taking off his jaw. I can't hear what he's saying because Jim Brown and the commentators are talking over him. And surprisingly, we have Rich Goins back in commentary or announcement, and he announces the fighters. He tells us this, and at this moment, guys, this is how the fight started. So, I'm sorry for talking too much, but I just want to get this fight over with, but this fight was so fun. So the fight starts out with Keith, they're scaring off each other, throws a left punch, and then you have Keith Hackney putting up his legs. He's spreading his legs like a V shape like this perfectly. Like he has his right foot here in the back and his left foot. He's leaning his left foot like this. While you have Joe San, he also has his right foot back and leading off with his left foot. So they're both handling with their left foot. But Joe San is doing this. He's bending his leg like this like with his back right leg like this, with his other leg, with his knee bent like this in a weird stance. And he's putting his hands like this, like he's putting his hands like this, like he just wants Keith to punch him while he's holding his hands down while putting it between his left leg where it's bent like this. Like Joe San, I don't know what his Joe Sando style was, but it's such an awkward style. I just, what the heck was he thinking about? And surprisingly, Hackney did scare with a left kick that he did through to Joe, but didn't nowhere. And then he throws a right kick to Joe's left foot, and he goes for a full 360. He puts out his he does a 360, and then he puts out his hands like this, and then he sticks out his left leg again with that awkward stance, and then he puts his head like this. I thought he was actually sticking his tongue out doing for some weird reason. I don't know what Joe San's doing. But then, as they're both stung each other, he's backed into the fence. Keith attacks him, kicks him, throws a punch, but he gets him too close to the fence, grabs him on, and Joe, out of nowhere, Joe takes down Keith Hackney. The crowd is going bananas, and Keith did manage to wrap his legs around Joe's right leg to get him stuck. But at this moment, Joe has Keith's head on his left armpit. And then he finally gets his leg. He finally escapes the leg of Keith Hackney's legs. Commentators still point out how they saw Hackney get away from a 600-pound person when he got on bottom. But this is crazy. I will say, though, guys, I like this fight because it goes to show you what weakness is. I love that the fight was even. So here's the thing, guys. At the first minute, the commentators point out that he actually has. Okay, guys, so this is what happens. Joe finally gets his right leg caught away from Keith, and now they're both on path. So this is what Keith is. This is Keith's head, and this is Joe's head. He's wrapping his arms around him like this, with bending his body, and while barely laying down. So he's not choking Keith Hackney, but he has his arms wrapped around him while on top of half of his back and head of the stomach. Both of them are in their stomachs. Because with an arm lock tight around it, he's not choking him. And the commentators point that out. He's just holding him down. And at this moment, I'm thinking to myself, punch the guy. Like, at this moment, Joe San should realize, maybe I should just punch him. I can't punch him in the groin or else I'll get disqualified. But hey, the least he can do, like, he has his left armpit still locked into Keith Hackney's head, so he could try to throw some punch but he does nothing. The commentators pointed out that he's not following up with anything. And the ref is saying, keep working. We even have a right arm picked up by Keith, which I thought he was throwing a punch. He's trying to work that hand free. And then he finally gets back up. And at this moment, he finally gets his legs. He's laying on his legs. Keith is getting up barely with his legs. And Joe San is throwing rabbit punches to his back at this moment. Why? And then the most funniest part is, okay, guys, listen here. Keith Hackney, 5'11.5", has his arm, his head is stuck inside a 5'4" guy's armpit. So his body is angled in an L shape. He's so tall by this 5'4" guy putting him in a headlock that it was so ridiculous. And guys, let me point this out. In each fight, each fighter is wearing shoes and another fighter is not. Now, the Ron versus Royce Gracie fight we just talked about, they were barefooted. Joe San has shoes. Keith Hackney is barefooted. And in other MMA fights later in the quarterfinals, there's one guy that's barefooted and the other guy is wearing shoes. It's ridiculous. I just don't know why. So they get to a knee, and out of nowhere, Keith is trying to escape, and all I see, he's finally trying to stand his ground. Keith is trying to stand his ground, and Joe Son, out of nowhere, is pushing him. But he's not pushing him down. He's pushing him forward to the fence. And the reason he's doing it is because Keith is barefooted. It's so funny. His head is stuck inside Joe's armpit, and he's trying to grip the canvas, but he can't because he's barefooted. So Joe is pushing him while Keith's feet are sliding on the canvas like he's in an ice hockey rink, like in a hockey rink. His feet are sliding like they're on ice while Joe is wearing shoes so he can grip the canvas. He's pushing this 5'11" and a half tall guy to the fence. It was so funny, and he finally... Oh my God, I had to watch that back. It was so good. As he gets his legs and his butt touched to the fence, one of the commentators pointed out that Keith throwed a blow to the belt. Like, someone said that there was a blow to the belt, but it's legal for some reason. I am a little bit questioning that, because one of the commentators said that I think someone said that Keith might have punched Joe below the belt, but it's illegal. This is dumb. So finally, Keith finally gets his legs and his butt to the fence, and at this moment, Joe Son is trying to put some huge headlock and trying to just grind out that head of Keith, and he does it so close to the fence. Now, guys, this is the mistake that cost Joe the win. Joe, not only he wasn't throwing any punches, he wasn't doing a lot of offensive, he just threw a couple rabbit punches. His next error mistake. So his left armpit on around Keith. Keith can look down to where he can see the left foot of Joe. So what happens, Joe picks up his left foot, and then he shoves his left leg straight into the groin of Keith. Keith notices it, so he picks up his right foot and ties it in. Like he picks up his right foot and locks Joe's left leg, takes him down, still on his armpit, and then he's throwing a punch. He throws punches on Joe's left leg. And then the biggest, oh my gosh, the 2-minute mark, the last seconds of fight, he's throwing groin punches on Joe. And at this moment, the camera cuts down where another camera angle cuts on top of the fighters. You can clearly see blows by Keith throwing so many unanswered blows to Joe. It was so, I didn't like it. But then he puts on the lock only for Keith to put on the blood choke. This is what it is. He puts his left hand straight into Joe Son, trying to grapple on him. Joe lets go of the headlock, and then he's having his right hand grabbing on, holding on to the trunks. And then Joe Son finally taps out on the back. Big John McCarthy, for some God knows why reason, he decides to wait a few seconds, tell him, are you done? Only to tap him again, tap him on the butt, tap him near. It's just so ridiculous. He tapped him so many times that it took Big John McCarthy 5 to 10 seconds to realize he already gave up. 2 minutes and 44 seconds of fight, and that's how she wrote. So, as Keith finally gets up, I think Bruce Beck said this. He said, and I quote, as Keith gets up, congratulations on the win. He points out to Joe Son saying, I don't think he's going to gain a lot of fans by his tactic, which is the Joe Sando. And then the other guy points out, I don't think in a no-holds-fire situation, there are no rules. There are nothing. And then Jim Brown points out, he's better than I thought he was, which I'm surprised that Jim Brown even actually said a good thing about Joe Son, while the other two commentators were just talking crap about him. Oh, I don't think he's going to get any fans for his Joe Sando. Yeah. I just think he lost all his fans a long time ago. So they show us the replay with the takedown and this or that, which, I don't know. So, guys, Keith is finally in the quarterfinals, and don't worry, he is fine. But Joe Son, guys, would never come back MMA fighting again. He would have some controversial career. By 1995, in July, he went into a kickboxing fight against Nobuaki Kakuta, which ended in 1 minute and 40 seconds by first round loss by KO. He would come out, and but surprisingly, he came back MMA in 2002 in February the 22nd in Pride the Best Volume 1. Surprisingly, he had 3 MMA fights in 2002, and those were the only 3 MMA fights he came back out of retirement. This is how they ended. The first fight ended in 33 seconds by first round loss against Yusuke Imamura. Joe lost because he lost by TKO due to an elbow injury. April 12, 2002, he leaves Japan and goes to Los Angeles, California to fight in Extreme Pancration 2. Pancration 2 against Joe Morir. He loses in first round, unknown time. We don't know how long the fight was, by tear submission. Don't know what that is. And then he comes back in July 20, 2002 and Pride the Best Volume 2 back in Tokyo, taking on Junkei Nakajima. And he lost that fight as well in 54 seconds by TKO, a shoulder injury. That was it. Retired 0-4. But then the rest of his life would come bad because he was also involved because, sadly, his life would change. Whether it's true that he had the spirit of the cross of Jesus, life would change because in 2008, he was arrested in connection of the 1990 sexual assault after a DNA evidence was linked in a crime. As in 2011, he was found guilty when he was sentenced to several years in a California prison. I don't want to talk about the torture and the manslaughter convictions he had when he was arrested for kicking in the door of a roommate's car and pleaded guilty for felony vandalism in that time. And he had a 60-day probation around that time. And then, like I said before about his 1990, when he was an anonymous victim, was walking back to her apartment alone with her dog, and Joe distracted her by asking for directions and pretending that he was lost. And I don't want to get to that. It's, if Joe Son really believed that he was having the spirit of Jesus with him, I don't know. But believe it or not, guys, it would even get worse because later on, around the years when he was in jail, sentenced at the time, while incarcerated, he was convicted of beating a cellmate to death, and it was sentenced to another 27 years of voluntary manslaughter. As of right now, he's sentenced to 34 years, and he might be there forever. The Iron Ball, which is his nickname, was done. I don't know what to say, guys. And I don't know why Joe Son beat up a cellmate at the time. I wonder if he just wanted to die and suffer for the rest of his life. He didn't want to live there, but I don't know, guys. There's so much suffering to do in this world, and I don't know why the world has to be this way. I don't know why people have to be this horrible to treat a woman for lost in directions. Looking up the information, guys, I don't know why the world is like this. I don't know why there's people online that are giving me crap just because I want to hang around with people like Shy Willy Fillion and other VTubers, and then be with Tried to Talk, or even meet Markiplier and Jack, or Mr. Beast, or the Paul brothers and such. And I just don't know why. Why people putting me in dangerous situation? Like, guys, Joe Son got what he deserved and being convicted to 34 years. But me, all I wanted is to be a famous celebrity. And the only thing I wanted to do is be involved, and like I said before, guys, I don't want to do YouTube forever. Like I said, I want to go around the world and be with people I really want to like to be. And if the state of Maine is not going to help me, then why should I go to jail? Like, why do people want to put me to jail because people are calling me a predator someone called me a murderous brony murderer for some reason. I don't know why, because I quit being a brony during the end of 2021. But yes, I did reunited doing some MLP videos this year, but it was just a one-off thing. I did the Hunger Games thing and I reacted to Storm XF3's real life videos because he's more of a respectable person, in my opinion. It was just a one-off thing, so I don't know why people still think I'm a brony, even though I just did a part-time thing this year. So I just don't know why the world is turning against me, and I just don't know why. Like Joe Son and what he did in his convictions in 1990 and everything else that he was involved in until he was arrested years later in 2011, he got what he deserved as a sexual assault and everything with his manslaughter and attacking a cellmate. And then we even heard that there was a moment where Son was instead charged with conspiracy to commit suicide and torture crimes for no salute and limitations in 2011, which he also pointed out. I don't know what to say, guys. I just really don't know what to say. Like this guy is messed up, dangerous. I would never do horrible things unless that the internet and the public push my balls. And I think the reason the world why mass shootings and murderous and killings are happening in today's world is because people don't care. The internet likes to mess people's minds up, and they like to ruin people. People in comments and online like to throw horrible things to people, and it makes that person like me feel bad. Like no matter how many times I try to make the world a better place and try to be around with people I want to be with, people just push my marbles and they just like to start another mass shooting. And the person in the comments gets away with it. If a person in the comment and today says something and then the police come by, they're going to arrest the person that was upset online because he didn't get used. He can't ignore the person that comments. The person that comments is going to get away with murder because he just pissed off a person online and he's going to buy a gun and shoot someone in the head and kill everyone. And they're not going to blame the guy in the comments. People are going to blame the person because he did not ignore the person in the comments or even blocked him. If you had a chance, why didn't you just block him? Dude, I blocked enough people in my time, but there's so many people that I don't want to block because I want to have a bigger fan base, but the world just really likes to push me for no reason, and I don't know why. And like I said before, guys, there's a lot of people. And that mass shooting that took place last year near my city, those people didn't deserve to die. Hell, my father and I thought it was a bunch of black people that started the shooting last year in my city. I didn't know it was a white guy. How was I supposed to know? Like, dude, there's so much stuff out there in the world today. People just like to push you further and further into the world. And people in the comments would just like to say horrible comments of how horrible you are. But people don't know because, guys, I have so much amazing ideas in my head, but I can't do those ideas on YouTube because I'm not a great editor. Some of the ideas I have in my head today are things that are so hard. I need 2 or 3 people to work on my videos to make great content. And even Markiplier pretending to be a mascot named Wilfred Warstash, he has a bunch of people doing filming and doing this. I can't do all that by myself. And even if I do, what's the algorithm? I just think the world is just that people just really like to mess with you. And I just don't understand why the world would like to push me just because I'm just trying to be around with people I want to be with. And even one person that comments that I might be stuck in the state of Maine forever, but why would I? It's like the only time that I might lose my mind is if I live alone for the rest of my life or be around with someone I might not like or even marry a woman that I'm never in love with, but I just want her children. Yeah, and I really do mean that, but I don't want that life. Hell, even my father, guys, my father sacrificed the woman that he fell in love with, and she was a nice woman. He loved her so much, but he left her for my mom and my brother and me. My father might have not liked it because he knew he already had a life, even if he didn't like my mom. And me and my mom and my father, they never liked each other. Yeah. And I was beaten up so bad as a child because my mother never wanted kids. And she grew up around with beating me up. Even though my father disciplined me, but he didn't do it dangerously like my mother did. So you remember why sometimes I flip out in life on the internet? Because I was raised by a family that was retarded. Not my father's parents, but my mother's parents. So if you see me in public and I get involved with something I wasn't supposed to do, just be grateful I'm not attacking you, as long as I don't care if you respect me or not. As long as, if you're a woman, I want you to like me as a friend, not as a person that you know on the internet because you think I'm a stalker type person. If the world can understand more about me and try to get along, I think we can actually get stuff done in life. And if there's people that can actually help me learn the basics of not YouTube, but NASCAR, boxing, or even try and become a professional wrestler, just like Logan Paul. Because at the end of the day, guys, I just want to get out of the state of Maine and push my luck. I pushed my luck so much that I became, and guys, I'm in public 24/7, and I've done a lot of dumb stuff in a good way, not a bad way, just to gain some attention. Like, it's not like the time when I actually started pretending to become the nature boy Ric Flair, liking woo out in public, losing my mind, going, Mean Gene, woo! My God, Melexigene, what is going on tonight? I screamed at the park just to gain attention and just to let people in the public know, hey, who is that guy? Oh, he must be a celebrity. Oh, he must be doing a YouTube video. Where are the cameras? At the end of the day, guys, I'm just trying to gain attention for myself. Like, I'm not a normal person. And I just wish people in the comments would just watch this video first before you make a comment. And the people that don't, well, maybe you should have apologized, and maybe you should have been careful next time. So at the end of the day, it is what it is. Anyway, guys, sorry for talking too much. Let's get down to the quarterfinals. But first, I'm gonna take a 1 minute, a couple minute water break. So I'm gonna stop recording for just a few minutes, guys. So I'll be right back in just a couple minutes, if you don't mind. So be back in just a second. So after everything happened in the first two bouts, making me realize that the first two bouts were like, a 51-year-old guy getting outclassed by a jiu-jitsu killer, to the second bout being a short guy and a tall guy. They both had stupid errors. One did a dumb error and the other did a bigger dumb error and lost completely due to a controversy of unanswered low blows and strikes to the groin. But after those two fights, and keep this in mind, Keith Hackney is 2-0 in UFC, a guy that barely won two fights in both controversies. And I feel like to myself, after he won a fight against a 600-pound dude, but he should have won easily in a Joe Sando fight. And I'm like, how could you be that dumb? And at that moment, I realized Keith Hackney had no chance of beating Royce Gracie. If he could barely win two fights against fighters that would have been easy to win, I would have said, there's no way Royce Gracie is going to lose this fight. He's gonna destroy Keith. And then you get to the third fight, which is like, interesting. Melton Bowen, a boxer, comes in, and surprisingly, I was like, well, it's going to be interesting as long as he doesn't have one glove. And surprisingly, he does, but just normal MMA type gloves. So, yeah, okay. Taking on Steve Jenin, Jiu-Jitsu UFC 3 champion. Number 3. Steve is the first guy in UFC history to win a UFC championship in his debut of an MMA debut, even a debut in UFC. And I don't think that's never been done before, and I don't think it's never been done since UFC 3. So at this moment, I'm like, okay, this is going to be an easy win for Steve Jenin. That's what I thought. And surprisingly, No, it wasn't. He had to earn it. So this is what happens. So after all that stuff that happened in the second quarterfinals, we get down to the boxer. So narrator points out and says, and I quote, 25-year-old Melton Bowen comes to the Ultimate Fighting Championship as the only Western boxing. He was a WBF Intercontinental Heavyweight Champion, which I did not know that. In 37 professional bouts, he's won 24 by knockout. Not bad. And then he tells his name. He's from Miami, Florida, which I really love the city of Miami, Florida. Well, I love the beaches of Miami, Florida. The city, interesting. He comes here to do what he has to do, taking everyone right out, and that's all that matters. Well, good luck, as long as you have the right gloves properly. By the way, Melton Bowen is also wearing... Melton is also wearing boxing shoes, just like Joe Son wearing shoes. Melton is also wearing shoes as well in the octagon, while Steve Jenham is barefooted. Guys, I just find it so confusingly weird that we have multitude of fighters fighting in boxing shoes. I just didn't like it. And by the way, they also told us, the commentators pointed out that his record's 32 wins and 5 losses. By the way, they even said that the WBF Intercontinental Heavyweight Champion, even the commentators pointed that out. They even think that, it almost seems like that they're telling us that the WBF is actually a major division or a major organization. As of right now, in 2024, BoxRec is including it as a major. So take that for what you will. And if it does, then hey, Evander Holyfield is a 5-time heavyweight champion. Great. I think. So anyway, the commentators pointing out our defending champion, Steve Jenham, the current champion, a founder and instructor of innovative martial arts strategies in Omaha, Nebraska. And then the narrator changes his voice to saying, Omaha, Nebraska. A uniformed police officer, Steve, will be the man to beat tonight. Which I was like, why did the narrator change his voice when he did that? Question mark? I don't know. So, yeah. So, Steve comes out and says, hi, I'm Steve Jenham. I'm the current UFC champion from Omaha, Nebraska, and I'm here to defend my title. Respect. They even pointed out that he's an Omaha City police officer, came out of a parking lot as an alternate, and won UFC 3. Yeah, I am surprised that Steve Jenham came out of a parking lot to even fight and then to even fight in the final fight. That right there is amazing. And then he won that event in September. This is December. You cut October, November. That's 3 months ago after that show. Jesus. By the way, guys, I forgot to mention, guys, while watching the footage back, guys, remember when I talked about the theme songs of UFC where each fighter came out in the entrance arena to get into a fight? When I said the AC/DC Thunderstrike did that sound, I made a mistake. I was actually talking about the intro of UFC 3, the opening intro of the show of that UFC. What I meant to say is, guys, so guys, remember when I said about U2, their song Where the Streets Have No Name by U2, where they did dun, 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 where one fighter could enter in the ring, and that's what it looked like. The second theme song, I meant to say, looked like a rendition of Deadliest Catch, Dead or Alive by, you guessed it, Bon Jovi. Like every time a fighter comes into the ring, it almost looked like it was actually a rendition of a like it was a weird. Guys, like remember, guys, I'm sure some of you wrestling fans out there know about Jimmy Hart. Jimmy Hart actually became a lyricist and a person making theme songs for WCW during the final year in 2000, where he made songs which were not good, such as the 3 Counts gimmick and the other theme songs that were not good, except Sid Vicious's awesome beat he did in 1999. It was almost like a rendition when Jimmy Hart created Vince Russo doing a theme song, which was a rendition of the song Black Sabbath, Iron Man. You know that dun 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 dun. Like he even came up with a rendition of doing Vince Russo's theme song like that. Only this time he made it like dun 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 dun. It was a weird. It was so weird. I was uncomfortable listening to Vince Russo's theme in WCW. It was so bad. That's what it looked like when listening to Steve Jenham and some other fighters that would enter the ring, where I hear that. But when some fighters come out. And by the way, guys, even when that part's done, this is what they do. The Deadliest Catch song, this song comes out like this. It does. And then that hard beat of that dun, 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 dun. You know, it was, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure you viewers heard that. Yeah, I'm not gonna get into it. I actually like that sound of that, almost like Dead or Alive. But that like it seems soothing in some theme songs. But yeah, I don't know, guys. I just feel like UFC tried to come up with theme songs, but they only had two, and they just decided to say, "Hey, have one fighter enter in this song and the other enter in the other." Yeah, guys, UFC had a lot of problems of coming up with their new theme songs, and they barely had a couple, and they decided to just put the two songs for each fighter to come out with one or the other. It's crazy. I don't know. Sorry for talking too much, but I just wanted to point that out. So Steve is 30 years old. Melton Bowen is 25 years old, 6 foot, 225 pounds, while Steve is 215, 5'10". So... But as a boxer and the ninjutsu, Steve Jenham, it is. By the way, they did show a close-up of Melton Bowen with not boxing gloves, but gloves that could not hurt your hands. So he would come out punching. Like if you look at the gloves, the gloves he's wearing is somewhat interesting, but I don't think it would work. Now, Jim Brown pointed out while Rich Goins was announcing the fighter, saying that that Steve has kicking techniques even when he's on his feet, and he points out that he doesn't think that Melton knows how to defend against that. So, you have to understand, if Steve is a smart fighter, he might win this fight. By the way, even the commentator, I think it was Jeff. I think he stated that Bowen was a security guard in the Florida school district, played some football in high school, but has been boxing since he was 8 years of age. And his stepfather used to take him to the gym every single day. Well, I'm jealous. I wish my father might have done something like that to me when I was a kid, but I guess he just didn't want me to get hurt or even get punched. Like I did learn karate, but I never learned all the basics other than just, it was just ridiculousness. So my father took me out of it. Like, yeah, I don't know what to say, guys. There's some things like it is hard to have a father, even as a stepfather. Like, guys, a stepfather teaching you to go to gym every single day. Guys, as a child, I actually wanted to go bowling every single day and learn how to see how I see those grown-ups in college. I see some college kids as a kid thinking to myself, how are they hooking the ball? How are they rolling the ball? And how are people doing two? Even as a child, I was into seeing some people using two hands. And even I was starting mimicking the people the same way as adults. And my mother and father were confused because they didn't understand why I was throwing the ball with two hands. Not because I was a tiny kid and the ball was heavy. Like I was just running like I was being a professional bowler, like the grown-ups on the other side of the bowling alley. And I just threw the ball and I was pissed off because the ball is always going to gully because I always throw it right. It's like every time I watch PBA bowling on television as a kid at the time and seeing Walter Ray Williams or Brian Voss. Well, I did saw Brian Voss once before in television when he did the PBA doubles, mixed doubles, which was his last title win. So interesting enough. But every time I see people grab two hands and just throw the ball, which was a new thing back then, because back in the day when I was a child, people were still using one hand, but I saw some people in the East were using two-handed balls. But on television, it was never used at the time. So every time I grabbed two hands. Even when I was 10 years old and 11 years old, I tried to just throw the ball or even spin the ball. And I always throw it way to the right, the same way. Well, I'm not going to get into it, but I'm not going to talk about how Pete Weber defeated a bowler and won the title when the guy Bellard, I think it was his name, when he threw the ball into the gutter and lost the title. I try to do stuff similar like that. I just throw the ball straight to the gutter on purpose because I want the ball to spin. I always keep getting fired up and pissed off. Yeah, my father and family, they never understood how to play bowling. They just think bowling was for fun. But as a child, I was taking it seriously, and I was pissed off. I guess sometimes when you're living with a family and they want to teach you how to do stuff, but they teach you too late in sports. Hell, even when I try to learn how to play baseball and try to swing a bat, no one told me to pick up my front foot and then step down and then swing to get more power. No one told me that. Even the damn coaches at the time when I was 12 years old never told me that. At the end of the day, guys, there's a lot of humans that make dumb errors. They think, oh, I'm not going to do nothing good because no one teaches me. I'm just upset. Guys, if I ever have children in the future, I'm gonna discipline them so much. If I fail to become a YouTuber or something like that, it's hard because I don't want to be a failure. Like, I don't want to have future kids or grandkids to become failures like me. And I would push their luck to help them do much. And I just wish my father pushed me when I was a kid, but my mother never did. She just pushed me on trying to become a poker player and try to gamble, which she taught me that a lot. That was the only thing my mother taught me. My father taught me stuff, but he never taught me a lot. He only taught me a few this or that, and then that's it. Like, I don't know, guys. Even my brother did taught me how to play tennis and how to hit a racket with a ball perfectly, which I have learned a lot about that. So, but I should have learned it early in my life. So, I don't know. At the end of the day, I am a little bit upset that no one taught me a lot of stuff as a kid. It just seemed like maybe they thought they didn't. I think my father stopped me in life because he didn't want me to become a baseball player or a soccer player because he didn't want it to be a full-time thing for my life, because he thinks maybe if I become a really good player, it would be really hard because I was with handicapped people back in the day, and he thinks that maybe doing this for the rest of your life until you're in your 40s, like, he didn't want to make me get hurt or think that he didn't want me to travel around the world or even travel to places, because I think my father was just trying to help me. He didn't want me to play sports and say, oh, you're going to do baseball for a full decade. Even if I was a really good baseball player, which I know I wasn't, but if I was, I just don't think my father was going to let me. Or if I was going to become a professional bowler, I just think maybe my father thought it was a boring thing to say that you're going to play professional bowling for the rest of your life because it's boring playing 2 or 3 or 10 games for over a day in your life, because it's boring, because all you're doing is just throwing the ball over and over again and in an alley or in a lane. It's boring. Or seeing someone hit a ball with a stick and run around the bases. I think my father never liked those sports. My father never liked those sports as much because it's just not always entertaining. So I guess that's why I got into boxing, professional wrestling, and NASCAR, because it was a more sport that was not calm, but it was more intensified. And I think that's why I was more into those sports more than anything else. Even when I tried to become a basketball player in high school, all I was good at is making a lot of penalties and getting fouls and getting kicked off the team. Every time I see a person go for a layup, I elbowed him. One time I grabbed someone, I slammed him down like I was doing the Guzzo choke slam, like friggin' Big Show. Yeah, I was just, yeah. I don't know, guys. It was bad. Anyway, guys, enough talk. So the fight stops out. So they both start out with, so it's actually hilarious because Melton is wearing yellow boxing shorts. Steve is wearing white boxing shorts, but his team is wearing yellow shirts like they're SpongeBob. It's ridiculous. So they both study each other in the fight. They're in the middle of the ring, and surprisingly, both of them are leading off with their left foot. Like I said before, Melton is wearing shoes. Steve is not. He's throwing out kicks, this or that. And when I say kicks, I'm talking about Steve because the people wearing shoes can't kick. So, yeah. So they're both starting out. They're both stunning each other. Like Steve is throwing kicks, scaring him off. And then around the 50-second mark, we do see a punch thrown and then another punch by Melton. And then before the minute mark starts, Steve tries to come up close. Melton scares him. He throws a crazy left punch that completely missed it by a full mile because Steve ducked, grabs onto him, and now he's wrestling him down, gets him to the fence, and finally takes him down. And then we have a bunch of punches to the back by Melton. And at 1 minute, 10 seconds, he's finally down. They're stuck on the cage. We're getting punches by Steve, blocking. And at this moment, Steve even grabs onto the fence with his left hand at one point for a while. And it's even crazy because he's just rifling strikes as Jenna is landing punches after punches and such. And then we get a little bit of we even get a little bit of elbows for one point, I think. And then out of nowhere, around, I think it was the 3 minute mark or the 3 minute mark, I think it was, is when Melton finally got out of Steve. And now they're back on their feet, grabs, and then Steve puts his back to the fence. And at 2 minutes and 40 seconds, when the timer pops out at 2 minutes and 40 seconds, he gets him to the fence. Steve is pushing him to the fence, grabs him by his left arm, and does an, oh my God, rose him up and slams Melton to the canvas. And surprisingly, like one of the commentators pointed out, that was a hip block, a classic wrestling move, which is surprising. At that moment, I was like, oh yeah, Melton's done. He can't do nothing. He's tired. His body's slammed. Yeah, he has no chance of making it. He has no chance. Like Steve is still throwing punch after punch after punch, punch after punch after punch. And surprisingly, Melton is still standing alive. At 2:30, he's throwing punches to the back of Steve's head as well. Like at this moment, there's so much cheatiness. At this moment, someone is going to get seriously injured and their careers are going to be over. And Steve is grabbing onto part of Melton's arm at one point. And then the fight ends. So the fight ends at this moment. So this is how the fight ended. At 4 minutes and 36 seconds, he's grabbing onto part of Melton's body. He's even putting his left elbow right in between the neck of Melton's neck. And Melton grabs his right arm and shoves it away from him. And as he does that, Steve grabs that arm, gets up, and puts in the armbar. And then seconds later, the fight is over. Melton knew it. He taps out, and that's it. And of course, the referee does stop the fight because he already saw Joe Charles did it to Kevin Rozier, so it's probably for the best to just stop it before someone does get hurt. 4 minutes and 47 seconds. I did not expect this fight to last that long, and surprisingly, the commentators even pointed it out. How much did that fight take out of the defending champion? Well, it's funny you said that because it took a lot out. And then I think Jeff said, well, the first one is always the toughest when you're breaking the ice and getting into the flow, which you are right because it is surprising. They show us the replay talking about the Greco-Roman, 100% beautiful percent Greco-Roman hip hop, which was pretty awesome. And yeah, it was surprising. I did not expect this fight to last as long as they did. They show us the replay of the armbar, and that's about it. Jim Brown points out that we've seen some good action tonight, and it's a surprise for the termination. Every fighter's been great, and yeah, it's great. So yeah, it was a pretty good fight, and I kind of enjoyed it. So now after this fight, it was just all from here. This is where we get everything done from start to finish because Steve Jenham Well, his defending champion would come down in smoke because I'm not going to tell you guys because, well, I don't know what happened. No one told us what happened, but Steve Jenham would withdraw in the tournament in the semifinals. He would be replaced by one of the fighters, which I'm sure some people might know. But we'll get to that later. Yeah, defending champion. Tough. So the promo cuts back as we're in the screen for the fourth and final fight, which is the final fight for the quarterfinals. Narrator points out Oklahoma's own Anthony Macias is a professional Thai boxer with a record of 30-1 with 24 knockouts. Tonight, he'll be fighting with a home court advantage. So like I said before, guys, we're in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Anthony is the only guy from Oklahoma representing UFC in his hometown. So, yeah, he's the Mad Dog Macias, so that's all we have to know. Pretty awesome name, I will say that. But maybe it's not better than the future fighter he's going to take on tonight. And that is Daniel Severn. A guy that's 35 years of age. He has won over 70 titles to his credit. Daniel has made a wrestling life study. And then they cut to Daniel saying this. Hi, my name's Dan Severn. Dan Severn. Well, that's the first time we ever heard someone say Dan. I'm from Coldwater, Michigan. I'm a freestyle and Greco-Roman wrestler. When I step into the octagon, it's a good thing that there's a 6-foot fence because my opponent will be trying to escape. Yeah. And by the way, they even pointed out, the commentator said that he was assistant for 5 years as a wrestling coach in Arizona and Michigan State. 1994 AAU senior and Masters Greco-Roman Sambo champion. So, and even Jim Brown pointed out that he's one of the favorites, which is pretty awesome to point that out. And like I said, guys, I still love that. Dun, 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 dun. I freaking love that theme song. It's freaking awesome. So this is interesting. The narrator says that he's 35 years old, but Tail the Tape says he's 34 years old. Interesting. So anyway, but of course, you guys can look that up on Wikipedia to know how old he is, but I don't think it really matters. So guys, this is what we have. So they announced the fighters with everything else. This is the final fight for the UFC quarterfinals. Anyone can win this fight or anyone can go home early. With Oklahoma crowd being on the opponent and also having an amazing Dan Severn on the rope. It's pretty interesting. So, guys, this has to be one of the greatest debuts of all time. The city's kid of Oklahoma is throwing out a left kick. And by the way, guys, you want to know what's crazy? So, guys, this is what's crazy. Anthony is barefooted, but he's wearing a little bit of some tape around his back feet and his shins on both, while Dan is wearing blue shoes. So he can't kick. But yet again, he's not a boxer. He's not going to come out, and he's not even a kicker. So, yeah. So, Muay Thai fighter versus wrestler, that's pretty interesting. But not interesting enough because after Anthony throws one more kick, seconds later, Daniel would attack those legs, take him down in a double. And the way Anthony is moving around, barely flipping, he even gets stuck to the cage and jumps over him, gets him out. And then he tries to get back up. And then before you know it, he puts down Dan. But then Dan gets back up with him. And he's taking some shots, headbutts, this or that. And then he throws out some left elbows. And then Dan finally gets him back up and picks him up out of an unbelievable, he puts him up in a backflip. He grabs onto him. Anthony elbows him a bunch of times, grabs him, and picks him up for a backflip slam, if that's what you like to call it. But not again. He gets him back up a second time, where the commentators pointed out it was a back suplex, which is what one of them said. And then Anthony tried to elbow him in the back with the left at one point, but seconds later, he picks him up again and slams him again. The crowd is going bananas. And at this moment, Anthony is already getting hurt. And then suddenly the commentators are pointing out they don't know why Severn isn't doing anything to put any blows to him or in the head of Macias because he's not a boxer. Remember what he said in an interview about the Brawl for All? He's not going to come out with fisticuffs because he's not a boxer. He can't work because he's not a boxer. So, of course, he can't punch. But there is times that Dan will punch later in the fight. But the fight would end quickly because it's only been 1 minute since this fight started, so it's crazy. Dan is in control of him. He's putting in these amazing holds, but then he puts on the rear naked choke hold on him, and 30 seconds later, getting him stuck. Oh, Anthony, the hometown hero, taps out and gets him off. They both hug, and that's the end of the fight. 1 minute, 45 seconds. It was a good fight. Guys, a guy with a lost track with true technique like that is pretty amazing. So technically, the commentators pointed out that was a back suplex that Dan did to him twice. Even when he picked up Macias a second time, really hurt him. You can already tell that Anthony was trying to shake everything out of his head and the cobwebs, but yeah, you can tell Anthony was done for. So, yeah, guys. So we got Royce Gracie against Keith Hackney in the semifinals and Steve Jenham and Daniel Severn. We'll get to that in just a moment. So, guys, I am surprised that the commentators pointed out with fatigue has to be a factor in the second round for any fighter. Because Royce Gracie was in his first fight at 3:49, 2:44 against Keith Hackney. Steve was in 4 minutes and 47 seconds, and 1 minute 45 seconds for Dan Severn. By the way, the commentators even pointed out that the Square Pavilion can hold a capacity of 6,573, and they were very close to a sellout, which was called the Tulsa County Fairgrounds Pavilion Arena, which is crazy because when I looked up the venue, and like I said before, it was packed with 5,857 crowds at that time. I looked it up on Wikipedia, and it said the original capacity is 6,311. And it is what it is. Back in 1994 was different, but not in 2024. So maybe the capacity changed years later. Maybe. So they're set for the two-time champion to take the stage again. So yes, guys, the promo packages, nothing comes out. They just come out. Here comes the Gracie clan, the commentators pointing out, but I call it the Gracie train. And then Keith Hackney comes out with a towel on his head, doing everything, surviving, training for everything. I will say, though, guys, I actually liked it. Even though, guys. So, guys, as Keith Hackney is walking to the ring, they are pointing out that this is going to be a tough fight for Gracie because Hackney is a good fighter. But after watching the two fights that he won, I just don't think he has a chance. And as Keith Hackney steps into the ring, we just received word Steve Jenham is withdrawing from the tournament. And then they point out this is the way the Ultimate Fighting Championship works. In an alternate fight, one of the fighters will take over. Makes sense. And then as they're talking about how one of the fighters in the alternate fights early in the fight would take place, they cut to a woman in a black bikini, beautiful black bikini, holding on to the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu sign, Love it. And even when the camera gets close to her head, she's about to keep walking towards him, about to look at her backside. But guess what? The camera cuts to Keith Hackney. Oh, unlucky. What a perv. There was also another woman in the white bikini that walked past Keith Hackney, which was kind of crazy. So yeah, they point out that Steve Jenham has apparently sustained some damage from the fight that he was in. But right now, the big question is Hackney and Gracie tailor the tape. All we know is that so they actually point out that Marcus the Grasshopper Bossett will be in as you look at the tail of the tape. Okay. So Steve Jenham is out. This is the semifinals, and Marcus Bossett is in. So guys, I only talked about the Joe Charles versus Kevin Rozier alternate bout. The Guy Mesger, Jason Pham, that it's just a fight after the semifinals are over and before the finals. Just keep that in mind. I don't know if that's true or not, but who knows? I only talked about Joe Charles defeating Kevin Rozier in 14 seconds, but the other alternate fight ended at 4 minutes and 55 seconds with Marcus Bossett defeating Eldo Diaz by KO to the strikes. By the way, guys, consider there's only 10 fights in this show. 8 of them are submissions. Yeah, the 4 fights in the quarterfinal ended in submission. 2 of the fights in the semifinals are submission, and the finals is submission. And the Joe Charles and Kevin Rozier is submission. The other 2 alternate fights ended in KO and TKO. All fights in the tournament are in submission, and 1 alternate fight, submission. I just looked that up right now, and I'm surprised while I'm reading my notes on top of the screen as we're speaking. So, yeah, guys, we get our number 1 semifinal. The crowd is applauding, and at this moment, I'm like, there's no way Keith Hackney is going to win. The camera cuts to a couple girls wearing Hooters shirts on, which is pretty interesting. And before you know it, they start the fight. They both study each other. So this is how the fight starts. Both guys are barefooted. And guys, at this moment, all the fighters in the semifinals and everything else are all barefooted. Well, except Dan Severn. He's the only guy wearing shoes, and he's in the semifinals. So Keith Hackney, like I said, he's leading off with his left foot, standing with his left foot and his right foot back, while Royce Gracie is leading with his right foot and his left foot back. So they're both studying each other. Studying with the right is what Gracie's doing. And, well, of course, Keith is studying with his left front. So this is a orthodox southpaw thing we're getting to. So it's going to be an interesting fight is what I'm going to say. So anyway, guys. The fighter starts out. They're both studying each other in the middle of the ring. Royce is threatening some kicks, picking up his right leg as he always does. Starts out. He's starting out with his arm and his leg. And guys, if you even had to speed the video to 2 times the speed of the fights happening, all you're seeing is Keith Hackney picking up his hands over and over. And you're just seeing Gracie being still. He's being stiff, holding on to his arm, and he's just studying. He's picking up his right leg and just ready to do something crazy. But he knows that something crazy will happen. So what happens? The fight starts, and then seconds later, Keith scares him, and then he backs up. Gracie puts down to his knees. Oh, bad idea. But then Keith actually tricks him. Gracie gets back up. The crowd is going crazy, and then. So at this moment, Hackney doesn't want to get close to Gracie. He's trying to be careful. Then we get a little bit of some kicks. He's turning around clockwise, and Keith doesn't mind. Gracie's just pushing him forward to the back of the cage. And then as he does, he scares him, grabs him, gets it back up, and now we're 1 minute into the fight. They're finally trying to throw punches and kicks. At this moment, I'm surprised that they're both throwing punches and kicks. And then all of a sudden, he backs Keith against the fence again. 1 minute, 40 seconds of the fight. He finally pushes him to the fence. They're grabbing onto the fence like crazy. Like, it's so crazy. And one of the craziest moments, so Gracie's finally putting a headlock on Keith, as like Joe Son did, picking up his right leg between Keith's legs. So Keith can't grab onto him. as he did to Joe, but he's barely holding on. And then seconds later, around 220, he finally gets out of the hold. And then Gracie pushes him back to the cage again and just throwing some blows. Like, they're just getting their head. Like, they don't want to go down, but they're just throwing so many crazy grabs and holds. And at one point, Royce is throwing knees to Keith on the head. And then at 3 minutes and 15 seconds, he finally gets him down, puts on the technical armbar submission, or as people like to call it, the armbar. And now he's trying to get him back up. He's holding on. And before you know it, Keith is on top. And then finally he curls up into a ball, Royce wraps his legs around Keith. And at this moment, I'm just really surprised of how Keith is holding on. Like, they just passed the 5-minute mark, and Gracie is barely going to 9 minutes in 2 fights. Now he's throwing elbows to the head of Keith's head, grabbing around his leg, and then the fight ends where he picks up his right leg, puts it over on to wrap around Keith's arm. Now Royce's right leg is finally getting stuck into Keith's face, wraps around his arm. He's bending out his arm in an armbar, barely, getting Keith stuck. And before you know it, at 5 minutes and 32 seconds, he taps out. Big John gets out of it. And that's how the fight ends. So, I will say, though, it was a good fight. Much better than Ron Queef. But at this moment, I'm like, Royce Gracie might be really hurt. He has no chance of being in the finals. But for what you can say about it, it's going to be an interesting fight. So even though Hackney did okay, it was a good long fight. I will give credit for Hackney. He did stay in the fight longer than I expected. But Gracie, so Jim points out, will he have the energy to come back in the final fight? If not, then Joe Charles might take over in the finals, depending on if the last fight for Marcus Bossett and Daniel Severn will fight. If any of them get injured, then who knows who's going to win by default. But we'll just have to wait and see. So at this moment, they show us the replay. They show us everything else. They see Gracie walking out. And then they show us the tail of the tape where we have, or the tournament, Marcus Bossett and Daniel Severn. So as they show us the bracket, they show us a replay that happened early. Now, guys, like I said before, guys, I couldn't find Marcus Bossett defeating his fighter Xavier in the alternate fight, but they would show us footage of later where they showed us the end of the fight, where it shows Marcus studying against him. They're both wearing white pants, and surprisingly, Marcus is wearing a black belt, surprisingly. They're both studying each other, and I'm surprised that the fight is now, like, this fight lasted 4 minutes and 55 seconds for Aldo and Marcus Bossett, and they're still on their feet. I wish I can find this footage. So Marcus throws a punch on Aldo, scares him, throws another punch, takes down Aldo, throws another right punch, left, right punch, takes him down, throws a right, and then Big John stops him before the 5-minute mark. Someone threw the towel at Marcus because they want the fight to be over. So did. So he alternate takes the place, raises his hands. I will say, though, that replay they show us of Marcus Bossett hurting Aldo, that was a pretty good replay. So, guys, talking about fatigue and when he's tired, I don't know why they brought Marcus Bossett in the fight. 4 minutes and 55 seconds while Joe Charles defeated Kevin Rozier in 14 seconds. I don't know why. So they show us information about Marcus Bossett, everything else. 29-year-old. He holds third-degree black belt. And let's not talk about it. So he comes down the ring. And then he shows us a picture about him and Lost. Well, I'm not going to talk about it. So he wants the kids around the world and the nation saying that you can do anything you want to. And all you can do, apply yourself, what you can, and do it. Well, that's what I'm trying to do. Just no one believes me. So Daniel Severn comes out, this or that, and they both talk about their ages. So I'm surprised that the height and the I'm surprised that both their height and their size are different. I will say, though, Marcus Bassett and Daniel Severn are pretty in decent format here. So the fight starts out as this. They both study each other. Dan is now pushing him back to the corner. And by the way, Marcus Bassett was wearing white pants. He was wearing white pants when he defeated Eldo, but now he came out with black trunks. I don't understand right now. This is confusing. So anyway, Bassett is going clockwise around the ring, and then as Daniel is trying to study it, surprisingly, Marcus throws a great right kick to the body downstairs. Dan bends over a little bit. And then this is what happens. 20 seconds in the fight, Marcus throws a right kick up, and then instead of Dan backing up, he decides to stand his ground while Marcus actually does a right kick, spins 360, throws a left kick to part of the knee, which kind of hit Dan Severn to the right shoulder. Owie. Gets him down, and he puts him on with these crazy holds. He put him to the leg, brought him to ground, and then he puts on the triangle choke. And my God, the triangle choke at 52 seconds. Dan Severn wins. The crowd is going crazy. This is crazy. So Royce Gracie went 3 minutes and 49 seconds, 5 minutes and 32 seconds in 2 fights. Daniel Severn, 1 minute 45 and 52 seconds in 2 fights. I don't know what to say about this. And of course, guys, the alternate fight was Guy Musger and the Jason Farron fight. Yeah, I couldn't find footage, but yeah, the fight ended in corner stoppage. So, yeah. So Jim Brown points out that Gracie might have to become a puncher and a kicker. But yeah, they show us the replay of that failed spin kick that Marcus did to Severn, takes him down, even though Severn was coming in at the same time. And so, yeah, it was a pretty good win. I got to give credit for Severn. It was a good win. So, guys, I am not going to enjoy this fight because this fight went longer. Guys, I'm going to end it. Guys, I'm just going to go through this fight quickly as I can. So, guys, give me a break. So the crowd tonight in Tulsa at the Expo Square Pavilion, sellout crowd, or close to 6,500, or they would say 6,311 on Wikipedia. And so in the finals, at the same time, it didn't look like a sellout crowd, but close enough. Yeah, but yet again, not close enough. 58-57 to 6,500, not close. Was it better than the ECW 2006 pay-per-view? Well, this is better than that. So the finals, Royce Gracie and Ken Shamrock, Daniel Severn. So after the alternate bout was over, Gracie pushed much further in the semifinals. Severn did quick work in 2 of his fights. Who will reign tonight? This is going to be a close fight. The Revenge of the Warrior, UFC 4. Gracie comes out. They show us the Brazilian flag while Gracie is walking out. And then they show Dan Severn walking out amazingly. What a crowd taker and what an amazing... I don't know what to say about this. It's crazy. They show us someone else with a Hooter shirt on, like I said before. Tulsa, Oklahoma welcomes the world to the finals of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, Part 4, and this is scheduled for the champion. So the entertainment, the crowd promotions to present the final 2 fighters. $64,000 on the line. Please welcome Royce Gracie and Daniel Severn. So guys, this fight was... Guys, I don't want to get into this fight everywhere because the fight went by really long. And when I say this fight went long, I mean long. So I want to end this episode as quickly as possible because I'm almost at the 2-hour mark. But this is what I'm going to say. The fight lasted 15 minutes and 49 seconds by a submission triangle choke. Who won the fight? This is how the fight started. So both fighters started out. They're both studying each other. We're 15 to 10 or so, 20 seconds. They're both studying each other in the middle of the squared octagon. They both study each other. They're both leading off with their right feet in the front, so they're both orthodox. And Severn comes out 40 seconds of the fight. He sums out, grabs onto Gracie's legs. Gracie is kicking him in the back with his right leg and everything else. Ken Shamrock is on top of him. And at this moment, it's a finishing on the ground. It seems like that this is going to be the end of Royce Gracie. The crowd are shocked because Gracie has lasted 9 minutes in 2 fights, and Shamrock and Daniel Severn has lasted 2.5 minutes in 2 fights. And then in 1 minute, 40 seconds of fight, he's still on top of him. We're getting some eye gouging, grab punches in the stomach by Gracie. It was crazy. And about 2 minutes into this fight, they're just stunning each other as Ken Shamrock is on top of Gracie for a long time. And when I say he's on top of him for a long time, he would be on top of him for the remainder of the last 15 minutes. Severn would be on top of him for a long time. All I can say, guys, is that this is one of the most craziest fights in history. And some fans might say this was a great fight, but a really boring fight. But believe me, guys, in other UFC shows, it's going to get a lot boring. Because Royce Gracie's next fight in UFC 5, I don't want to talk about it. So after skipping a couple minutes in the fight, in the 3 minute 45 second mark of the fight, Severn's still on top of Gracie. Gracie's wrapping around his arms with his neck and such, grabbing onto him. He's wrapping his legs around Severn's back. And at this moment, he's on top of him. And Shamrock and Gracie, they're picking each other up. They're crawling around the ground on each other. Gracie on his back. They're crawling around clockwise from each. Like, I when you watch the fight and, like, if you had to speed it, like, it's just crazy. I don't know how to explain it. So we're finally getting to the 5 minute mark, and they're going clockwise, counterclockwise. There's one point where Daniel is getting back up, trying to get back up, but then puts him back on the ground, and now he's hitting against him. They don't know if they're showing Gracie signs of fatigue because he's been in a long 2 fights in his time. So who knows? And around 5.5 minutes of the fight, they're both pushing their heads against the fence. And then we see Gracie doing one of the most craziest things. At 5 minutes and 30 seconds, he picks up his left leg and he's using his feet. He's using the chain link fence as part of the octagon by pressing his feet against the chain link fence of the octagon. He even uses like the commentators point out, it's a toe grip along the fence line as he's using a toe grip. So that's what he's doing. He even uses it for a while. They're finally trying to get out of the fence. We're now 6 minutes into the fight right now. And at this moment, they're just like, there's times where Gracie's throwing punches, but Severn isn't. So, like, I'm surprised that this is crazy. But great, like, Daniel tries to get back up and throws punches and then gets back down sometime later. Now we're at the 7 minute mark, and the average bouts were 2 minutes prior to competition. This fight went a lot longer than the average of 2 minutes. It's crazy. So now the Gracies are in the corner with Gracie calling on, and the commentators say a lot of interesting things, actually. But I'm not going to get into it. So we get to the 8 minute mark where they're still, like, Severn is still on top of Gracie. They're just going clockwise. They go left, they go right on clockwise, like shredding, like dragging Gracie's back to each. They go left, they go right, they go back to the corner, they go back in a fence. We're at 9 minutes. This fight has gone longer by the minute. There's punches, throws, everything else. This fight is becoming crazy. Now we're at the 10-minute mark, and I'm surprised that these two are fighting for the championship, and none of them want to give up. Guys, this has to be one of the most craziest fights ever, even though it might not be an entertaining fight. But when you see some details of the fight with the toe grip that Gracie did on the fence, the grab, and even at 10.5 minutes, Gracie finally picks up his legs, he wraps his leg, and finally locking in the neck of Daniel's neck. When you see each detail of this fight was close for what it was. Severn did all he had to do. Gracie's putting on the toe grip again. There's so much pressure on Gracie that he's getting his back laid. It's just crazy. I don't know how. This is one of the most greatest fights of all time in UFC history for Severn and Gracie, that this fight marked it as one of the craziest fights I've seen of Gracie in history. But in all honesty, it was crazy. So we come to the 12-minute mark, and he's finally trying. They're back to where they're starting. We're at 12 minutes. And at this moment, they already surpassed the record of one fighter that won a fight in UFC 2 that went a long distance of over 12 minutes. So they are now past the 13-minute mark, and their heads are still against the chain of the fence. And then we got Gracie putting him on. He's putting his feet to the cage again. Like Severn, he's doing everything he can to hold the back. He even throws some punches back to Gracie. And then around 14 minutes, he's finally throwing kicks and such at one point. But he just Gracie wraps his legs back around Severn again. At this moment, I'm surprised. Even though Shamrock is throwing punches of his own, Gracie's throwing his own. Now we're at 15 minutes, and this is how the fight ends. So the 15-minute comes. They're both putting in unbelievable moments with the kind of stamina they're putting, which Jim Brown pointed out. They're throwing everything at each other. There's nothing they're doing. They're fighting for $64,000. They're fighting for fame. They're fighting for a championship. This is history of a future wrestler. This is crazy. So this is how the fight ended. At 15 minutes and 26 or so seconds or something like that, I think it was. It was around, I think it was 15 minutes and 11 seconds. Gracie finally grabs on. He flips his butt. He's sticking his butt and his legs on top, right onto the hold of the triangle choke on Severn. And Severn is trying to pull out himself. What Gracie's trying to do, as the commentator said, that Severn's trying to pull right out from under. That was that's what the commentators pointed out, because Dan realizes this as he crawled out to the side, and then he turns to the left, and now he's exposed for an elbow lock. Severn is stuck. Severn's in trouble. Now Gracie has his legs wrapped around to the arm and this or that head from a triangle choke, and Severn is stuck. He's stuck. He can't get out. In the final seconds of the fight, Gracie grabs his left hand and grabs his right foot and just squeezes the life out of Dan Severn. Squeezes it. And finally on his knees. And then Dan tries to go for one more interesting thing. He picks up his feet, and then he crawls from left to right to the other side of the cage. But it didn't go nowhere. The maneuvering did not work. And then he tries to get up again on his feet, but it didn't. He decides to tap out. And that's the end of the fight. At 15 minutes and 49 seconds. Daniel is finally getting picked up by the referee. Gracie is tired. The crowd is going crazy. And surprisingly, the commentator said that he choked him out. Unbelievable. Gracie is a champion again. And then Jim Brown says something interesting, which I was confused. He says, "Don't you ever say that again, Jeff." And then Jeff says, "Oh, what if, Jim?" "About a wrestler," Jim said. And then he points out, "Oh, Gracie is a wrestler. Yeah, he's out specialist. Gracie." Okay, well, that's... I couldn't hear what they said in commentary because the crowd are going bananas, but still, don't have to say that. So they show us the replay. They show us the card. Gracie's the champion on his back for almost over 14 to 15 minutes. They give him a check for $64,000. And then an amazing show of determination, of guts, of will by Royce Gracie on his back for almost 15 minutes. And he choked out Daniel Severn. What a win. His father's with him. They win on $50,000 in the first, $60,000 again. Now he has won. Like, if you had to add up the calculator for all the money he won in 3 events, he's won $174,000 in a row. Yeah. And then the show's over. They show us the card. We don't get an interview, or maybe I'm watching the wrong program. Yep, we still, "Hey, this is Jeff Blatnick, this is Jim, and my name is Who Cares, because I'm a new commentator here. My name is Bruce. So long from UFC 4, and that's how the show ends." And then they show us that AC/DC outro they showed us, just like they showed in the intro of the 3rd show, which I don't know why they didn't bring it back to this one. So yeah, that's how the show ends. But yeah, again, guys, this is what I have to say about this. You want to know what's crazy about this? Around this time, while Royce Gracie won, there's still some controversies to talk about. Like, even though there's no weight limits, no time limits, no this or that, it's all the same thing as the other UFCs. But at the end of the day, guys, I enjoyed the show for what it was, with a lot of crazy stuff. Like, yes, you could talk about Royce Gracie winning the event, defeating Dan Severn with a triangle choke, and the card was featured by a notorious fight between Hackney and Sando, and how the fight ended with landing of serious unanswered punches. But guys, if we look a little bit closer, as usual, there was a virtual martial artist of a significance of a contacted by other promoters of an event. The background of the story of this show starting, rumors stated that in another way, there was a recruited as a known fight as a Royce's challenge letter, where it stated that Mike Tyson was challenged by Royce Gracie while in jail, as it stated that Gracie wanted to challenge Mike Tyson at one point at the time. It is crazy because this was during the last several months of Tyson being in jail until he got out to take on that Peter McNeely. But all in all, guys, I really couldn't say much about it. There's not a lot of information to talk about, but yeah. But I will say, though, guys, even though we did have some new fighters, like, yeah, Ron Manqueef, not much. Joe San, MA's done. Melton Bowen, don't know much about him anymore. Anthony Macias, well, he would have an okay kickboxing career. And as for martial arts, he would continue to fight in champs until he retired for good in 2014. So 20 years of MMA. But yeah, surprisingly, he didn't have a lot of interesting success in MMA other than kickboxing, which I wouldn't say much about, but it was interesting. As for Keith Hackney, Steve Jenham, and Royce Gracie, them being back after UFC 3, I'm all right that they brought back other champs. Daniel Severn would become a legend after this show because later in UFC 5, live in April the 7th of 1995, the Independence Arena in Charlotte, North Carolina, they would title it as in UFC 5, because in UFC 5, they titled it The Return of the Beast on Wikipedia. But when clicking on it, it's called Gracie versus Shamrock 2. So, but they now call it The Return of the Beast. And you know what's crazy? At that time, the event would actually have many fighters receiving their own nicknames. And as for Joe Charos defeating Kevin Rozier, he would be known as the Ghetto Man. And Daniel Severn would be known as not Daniel, but as Dan Severn in UFC 5. Dan the Beast Severn would be born several months later because of this event. So UFC 4 did mark a new era, but it wouldn't mean that it was going to be the same for the next several years, because by 1993 to 1997, UFC would just be the same as they were until 1998. They had hiatus, and 1999 they went a little bit on a new ideal and other changes. So at the end of the day, I think they did an okay job moving forward slowly. But yeah, we would get some interesting stuff until after years to come, until the end of the 20th century. So I don't think there was much of a failure. This was actually a good, successful show, and it was great. 1994 ended with a bang with a lot of great heavyweight champions in boxing, and ECW, Eastern Championship Wrestling, would be called ECW Extreme, and we would have amazing talent with great moments of WWE superstar Bret Hart losing against a Bob Backlund in Survivor Series in November, only to lose against Diesel in a house show 3 days later, which would be the last time a house show would have a title change in the WWE champion. And then, of course, Diesel would retain it until Survivor Series 95 with Bret Hart winning. And then WCW, Hulk Hogan was making it big at the time. So, yeah, 1994 was making a lot of interesting changes. And, guys, there might be more in the future as we speak. But anyway, guys, that is the end for UFC 4, The Revenge of the Warriors. So thank you, viewers, for watching this, the 30th anniversary of UFC 4. I'm really happy I got this out of my mind. Thank you, viewers, for watching this. And with that being said, make sure viewers go down and know what other event's going to come to place, ladies and gentlemen. And as of right now, guys, even though I'm taking the hiatus for December right now as we're speaking, today it's already December the 3rd right now. Well, now it's December the 4th, because it's now 12 a.m. on my computer, 12:08 a.m. It's now December the 4th right now, and we're 12 days away from me uploading this video. So, but I'm also going to watch Kubrat Pulev take on Manuel Mahmoud Achar on 3 days from now on the 7th in Bulgaria. I'm praying for Kubrat Pulev to become the first Bulgarian champion, a male guy in Bulgaria to become a boxing champion. He's even as a heavyweight champion. So I hope best of luck to him and a lot of other fighters. And with that being said, thank you for viewers for watching. And with that being said, see you next time.